am kind of girl crazy, and kind of trying not to start screaming, crying, and throwing up right now, but if I do, I'm literally just a girl. I'm like kind of interested in the ideas that surround the hysteric to Femcel pipeline, looking at the history of gendering madness, the influence of this on representations of madness in the mainstream, to how this has informed the identities we construct online. Disclaimer moment: the word hysteria and other terms I've used in relation to mental health are currently thought of as outdated. For the most part, hysteria no longer exists today as a medical diagnosis. However, these terms are still used informally, and the ideas and biases associated with hysteria are still attributed with femininity, whether subconscious or not. It has suffered a pseudo-disappearance. Hysteria has shaped current meanings of femininity, sexuality, mental illness, gender, and more, and it is still extremely relevant to how women's experiences are framed today, both IRL and online. Its medical and social history is notoriously contradictory and hard to navigate, yet it is very consistent in its exploitation of women and extreme in its cishet androcentric ideologies. First thought to be a physical disease, hysteria is notably known to have a blizzard of symptoms, most of which were different aspects of what we now know as a regular functioning sexuality, because of the earlier associations to the womb. The etymology of the word hysteria cemented the link between madness and femininity, despite contemporary meanings of the word. Hypochondria was also referred to as a form of hysteria within early medical practices. The absence of gender within the etymology of the word hypochondria allowed practitioners to give a reasonable and sincere diagnosis to male madness, without the emotional frivolity, passion, and femininity associated with hysteria. It is worth noting that there is no hysterical equivalent, with hysteria categorized as a neurological disease. In the late 19th century, it's revealing that the massification of male hysteria during World War I led to the disappearance of hysteria as a diagnosis. These symptoms were instead attributed to war neurosis, what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). This avoided emasculating entire armies. Ultimately, the need for men not to be feminine led to the demise of the hysteria diagnosis, with its leftover attributes ascribed to as women's behavior. As said by psychoanalyst Juliet Mitchell, the disappearance of hysteria has since been reappropriated as colloquial language and represented within certain aspects of popular culture. Today, the word is used to describe exaggerated emotional reactions, synonyms of which include raving, obsessed, crazy, and dramatic, all of which are more often used to degrade a woman's character than that of men. Words associated with hysteria have consistently been used throughout history as a social tool to put women in their place, or eradicate them from certain social or academic circles. Weaponizing language relating to madness is used to discredit or place blame on the hysteric, the witch, the girl boss, the femcel, etc., in place of a man's actions. Red flags include, my crazy ex, she's jealous, she's obsessed with me, paranoid, bossy. Avoid people who use these words at all costs. I'm interested in the hysteric. What defines her? And what makes her such a spectacle? I would say that the hysteric is simultaneously hypersexual, hyperemotional, hyperfeminine, and the utter inverse of. The hysteric can be anyone regardless of gender. So, like, she's kind of inclusive. XOXO. She is captivating. Simply put, we love to watch the girlies lose it online, in the press, reality TV, or within horror and exploitation films. It's hard to look away when confronted with the crazy woman. Voyeur is heavily associated with her. She is sexualized. She is feared. She is entertaining, and she is relatable. This voyeur stems from early medical understandings of hysteria and its supposed symptoms of a sexual nature. The sexualization of the hysteric developed through the historic treatments of hysteria, which would have included marriage, pregnancy, sexual intercourse, and genital massage, or, in extreme cases, forcibly admitted into an insane asylum or undergoing surgical hysterectomy. It's fair to assume that consent probably wasn't given for any of these supposed cures. These associations were established by the work of French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot, who greatly influenced the developing fields of neurology and psychology. Despite finding hysteria to be a neurological disease, the immense photographic output of the Salpêtrière Hospital, the notorious Parisian asylum for insane and incurable women, where Charcot work played a crucial role in continuing the association between hysteria, sexuality, and voyeur. Under his direction, the hysteric inmates were methodically photographed to provide visual proof of hysteric fits, although these fits would have had to be posed. Considering the long exposure times of early photography, within these images and during his highly theatrical lectures, Charcot's work focused on the presentation of the hysterical body as an object of public spectacle, to be performed. Shrieks, swooning, a wrist to the brow, and seductive poses, following hysteria's disappearance from the medical community. It reappeared soon after upon cinema screens. Arguably, Charcot's portraits helped shape the character of the crazy woman in earlier days of horror. The narrative of this genre tends to create both the horror and eroticism around women's bodies, and the hysteria associated with them. This derives from them being made victims in one way or another, often by men or social attitudes, then consequently spiraling into madness. This character type became sensationalized from the film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and has since evolved into the paranoid insane, completely unhinged, crazy woman trope that captivates audiences today. Contradicting this are the visual representations of male hysteria that have often been portrayed in a comical way, or if sincere, then critiqued by certain audiences for its lack of realism. For example, in the films Jennifer's Body and Teeth, crazy men are usually represented as extremely sincere, emotionless, steely characters. They deflect their hysteria onto the women victims, thus represented by Scream Queen Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. There is another element of voyeur to the hysteric, and that is the gaze from which we look at her. In his seminal book Ways of Seeing, John Berger writes that women are always conscious of how they see themselves. We see ourselves in the history of hysteria, the hysteric stories, the images of her struggles, the language used against her, but also in the memes we see online that mock our sanity. Literally me right now, she's just like me for real. Me when, this is me BTW if you even care, I type online. Logged on from my girl rot FedEx. These iterations of hysteria seeped online with the emergence of social networks in the late 90s, and forming the identities we adopt online, particularly in relation to gender, most notably being the term incel, short for involuntarily celibate, originally coined by Lana, a queer woman intent on creating an inclusive community, to discuss her lack of sexual activity with others after she stopped participating in her online project. Around the millennium, incels then morphed from Reddit and 4chan into the notoriously anti-feminist, violent, self-deprecating, male supremacist subculture we know it as today, with it now branded as violent extremism by government officials. The violence that underpins this area of the internet has moved offline in recent years, targeting feminine and queer bodies, with our online identities reflecting this. It's unsurprising then that being a femcel, female involuntarily celibate, is becoming more popular, more talked about, and more relatable. This element of femcel is counteractive to incels, in the way that being crazy is embraced, and not being able to meet the unrealistic standards of misogyny, less user-friendly but still very present, is the concerning number of femcel-adjacent accounts or forums, where being self-deprecating becomes less satirical and more sincere, feeding into incel perceptions of women, spawned from the toxic depression posting pits of Tumblr, self-deprecating tweets posted on Anon, create mode as trauma dumping, and memes as oversharing. Aesthetically, the femcel identity can be seen as the cute, messy little sister of the melancholic pale blog, an embedded relic of Tumblr's past, and frowned upon by the girl boss. At their core, I think femcels are built on a deep disdain for mistreatment by men, an intense longing for toxic sad girl shitposting, and a post-ironic embrace for the aesthetics of all things girl rot. Arguably, being a femcel is low effort, hopeless, cute, satirical retaliation to these events unfolding around us in the form of cishet menophobia, largely justified, sometimes toxic, and dealing with grim situations the internet best knows how, turning it into a meme. Admin reveal. I'm GirlCrazy.